אברך אני חושב.
זה היה מוונצואלה. אנחנו אצלו היום בבית.
Good morning, Kahal Kadosh. Beruchim Habayim to everybody. Today, the 12th of Shevat, January 25th, shiur dedicated Lirfuah Shelema of Yosef ben Sophia among all of the Cholim of Am Israel. As the Kahal Kadosh sees, today we have the honor and the privilege of welcoming Hacham David Yosef that is visiting our Kehillah for a few days in Miami, and therefore we give the kavod to the great Rabbi to share a few words of the Torah with the Torah Kahal watching live at this moment. Bechavot Hacham.
First of all, Birshut, my dear friend, Rav Gaon, Yosef Galimidi. I love him. Baruch Hashem, he is doing a great job of spreading Torah, to give Torah to everybody. Baruch Hashem, Bezrat Hashem, he will have long life, בריאות, בכל אשר יפנה ישכיל ויצליח, מחיל אל חיל, להפיץ מעיינותיו חוצה. רבותיי, I am now in Miami, and people ask me about what is happening in the world. We don't understand why it happened, but we have to accept the gezerah of Hashem from one side, and then to do everything we can according to the halakha. So, I'm telling you, Rabotai, according to the halakha, first of all, we have to be careful very much. Every place we go, when we leave the house, to put mask on the face. 80% of the virus comes when people don't have the mask. If they have the mask, they can prevent it 80%. So it's very important to have the mask. To stay a little away, 2 meters in Israel they say, I don't know here how, but 2 meters between each one to his friend. And not to shake hands. And to be careful very much. So, we have time, Baruch Hashem, we can study Torah, we can fulfill mitzvot, Baruch Hashem. In Israel now, all the synagogues are closed. And we have to pray outside, and outside now it's very cold in Eretz Israel. So, this is Gezerah, we are sad about that, but we have to follow the orders. This is the Torah. ונשמרתם מאוד לנפשותיכם. We have to listen to the doctors. Even at the beginning, they didn't understand. Until now, I don't know how much they understand. But for sure, everybody knows, and all the doctors said the same about the mask and to stay away from each other. This is 100% important. And now, Baruch Hashem, they started with the vaccine. People ask me, it's good to take it or not? I want to tell you. In Eretz Israel, we have some rabbis that they are very professional about medicines, about sicknesses, and everybody goes to them to ask them. One rabbi, a Gaon, Rav Yitzhak Zilberstein, this rabbi, every week, he has a class, 1 hour, with the doctors. The best doctors come to him to listen his shiur about halachot that connected to medicines, to their job, their work. After that, he sits every week 1 hour with the best doctors, and they bring to him questions, they explain to him. So after many years, he himself became very professional. So in Eretz Israel, we trust him about what he says about medicines. Now all the best doctors went to him and explained to him about the vaccine, and his decision was 100% It's urgent. It's very important to everyone to take it. So anyone who can do anything to have it, he has to do that. Another rabbi, Rabbi Elimelech Führer, very famous in Eretz Israel. People, when they has v'shalom, they have cancer, they have all the worst sicknesses, they go to him. And people used to listen to him. And also, he checked it very deep with all the best doctors. And he decided, it's very important. He went to all the greatest Chachamim, Rabbanim, and he told them, it's big mitzvah. And they told him to announce, to say it, that they told him, say that you are talking on behalf of us. We say it's big mitzvah. So it means now, except that we protect our life, we are fulfilling another mitzvah, lishmoa divrei chachamim. I heard that some rabbis said, no, wait, don't do that. I don't know if that rabbis checked it or not. If we ask halakha, two rabbis, one, he is familiar with that halakha, he understands, he knows, he said, do that. And the other one, he is not familiar, he doesn't know that halakha, and he said, wait, we have to listen to the one that knows the halakha. Or, Shulchan Aruch said, if someone asked a doctor, do I have to do this or not? And the doctor said, I don't know this sickness. I'm not familiar with that. I don't know. Shulchan Aruch said, this doctor about that is like everybody, like regular person, because he doesn't understand, he doesn't know. It's the same thing with halakha. Do we have to listen to the rabbis that say, wait, don't do that because they still check it? They are not professional. I'm telling you, Rabotai, 100%. They are not professional, the rabbis that said, don't take it. They didn't check it good. I trust Rav Zilberstein, Rav Führer, they are the best. They know, they checked it very deep. They spent long time about that. And we all have to follow them. So it's mitzvah to protect ourselves. I have a friend in Eretz Israel, 70 years old. A month ago, when in Israel we started to take the vaccine, I asked him, did you take it? He said, no. Why? My wife is against. I told him, very good news I have. You have the biggest Talmid Chacham in your house, your wife. You don't have to listen to her. Or at least tell her what I said, try to convince her. For the meantime, the man got the sickness. He's now in very bad situation. I hope he will survive. Be'ezrat Hashem, he will survive. But if he would take it before, the situation could be different completely. So everyone, don't wait. If you have the opportunity to have it today, do it today, not tomorrow. Everyone has to check with the doctors the best way he can take it as quick as he can. בעזרת השם, יתקיים בנו הפסוק, פרשת השבוע, כל המחלה אשר שמתי במצרים לא אשים עליך, כי אני השם רופאך, אמן כן יהי רצון. Thank you.
Be back in a few seconds. Okay, what a beautiful and pleasant surprise to have definitely one of the biggest Hachamim of our generation visiting our Kahal Kadosh and giving such a powerful words of Hizuk. I put the mask because I was sitting too close to the rabbi. He asked me to sit next to him, but now I'm going to remove it. The rabbi is continuing with his very busy schedule and agenda that he will have in South Florida for the next few days. So those that are watching in South Florida, the rabbi, I believe, will be staying with us for the next few days. So Yehi Bo'o Livracha, may his arrival to our city, to our congregation, and to the other synagogues that I'm sure he will be visiting the next few days, brings beracha to everybody here. Amen. So yesterday we discussed some of the Gemarot that we left pending from Friday and yesterday. Today we'll discuss the Zohar from yesterday and today. The Pasuk tells us in this week's Perashah, which we know Perashah Beshalach is a full Perashah of unbelievable miracles and blessings and protection and salvation for Am Israel. Besides the splitting of the Red Sea, the Az Yashir, the Bayosha, the reading of the Man, the Pesukim of healing, which were the great Hacham just quoted at the end of his beautiful words of Torah. So we have magnificent messages coming through the Perashah of today. So the Zohar Kadosh begins and it says, Ba'Hashem holech lifnehem yomam. The Pasuk says, and God is moving, it's walking ahead of the Jewish people. This refers when Hashem basically was guiding Am Israel in the journey in the desert prior to the Kiryat Yam Suf. The Zohar Kadosh writes and it says that even in our days, any place of the world where the person lives, there is an opportunity that God walks with the person constantly. And the Zohar Kadosh explains, how can a person achieve this concept? The Zohar says the concept of Torah learning. It says the concept of Torah learning, that a person devotes time to learn in the morning and in the evening, the way we know the very famous portion of Talmud, Shabbat, that discusses the idea of Kavata Aitim La Torah. The Jews set up specific times for the time of Torah learning, etc. So it says the Zohar Kadosh that when a person is able to learn Torah, not only he's developing a strong connection with Hashem, but the words of Torah have the ultimate purpose, which is to sanctify and to enhance our spiritual life. But in some areas, he says the Zohar Kadosh, a person is able to connect the concept of daytime and the concept of nighttime through the concept of the study of Torah. As we say every night in our Arvit prayer, Behagita bo yomam balayla, the concept of a person learning Torah in the daytime and in the evening. As the Pasuk in Yirmiyah says, Im lo beriti yomam balayla, hukot shamayim va'ares lo samti. If my covenant, which refers to Torah study, will not exist in the day and in the night, will have not been a purpose, or rather a justification for the creation of the heaven and the earth. As we learn in the Perashah at the end of Sefer Devarim with Moshe Rabbeinu, I think is in Perashah Vayelech, when Moshe Rabbeinu gives one of his final farewell speeches to Am Israel, Lo Bashamayim Hi. The Torah is not in the heavens. What does it mean, that pasuk? So Moshe Rabbeinu is telling the Jewish people, the Torah is very close to you. Ki karov elecha hadavar me'od beficha u'ilbabecha la'asoto. The Torah is close to you for action, for speech, for thought, etc. But Moshe Rabbeinu is trying to say, and I think that this is the message of that pasuk, is very simple, that there is the concept of why was the world created. What was the purpose of the creation of the world? Short answer, the essence of the existence of the Torah. And that's what Moshe Rabbeinu says. Lo bashamayim hi. No, in this week's Perashiot, soon we're going to read, actually next week, Perashat Yitro, we're going to speak about all the concept of the giving of the Torah. And the Gemara brings an interesting dialogue, it's quoted in many sources, that when Moshe Rabbeinu went up to receive the Torah, what was the question of the angels? Ma ben ilud isha benenu? what has to do a human being born from a mother among us. We live in the heavenly angels, in the heavenly spheres, surrounded by angels and spirituality. What do we need a human among us? So what God says to Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe Rabbeinu, don't be afraid. Hold yourself to my throne and start talking. Moshe Rabbeinu gathered the strength and start debating with the Malachim. And what does Moshe Rabbeinu ask the Malachim? Okay, let's see what the Torah says. First commandment, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I'm your God who took you out of Egypt. Moshe Rabbeinu turns to the angels and asks them, were you slave in Egypt that the Torah must remind you of God? Or idolatry? What, do you have the temptation of idolatry? Are you born from human parents that the Torah must tell you honor your parents? Remember the Shabbat to sanctify it. Why, do you work all week that you need a day off? Killing and all the commandments mentioned in the 10 commandments. At the end, Moshe Rabbeinu won 10-0. The Malachim remained speechless. Obviously, the Mefarshim explains that the Malachim knew these answers, but they wanted to offer Moshe Rabbeinu a certain level of resistance to understand that the Torah, even though the Torah is earmarked for the world, because lo bashamayim hi, a person cannot plant the field in the heavens and to give ma'aser. A person cannot take a piece of leather and make a tefillin in the heavenly spheres, or to take meat and to do shechita, etc. There is nothing of that magnitude or nature in Shamayim. And that's why the whole purpose of the creation of the world was for the Torah. That there are many who don't learn Torah, and Chas v'Shalom, whatever may have happened through centuries, but bottom line, the Torah is the way we call it in the past, the GPS for our life. Regretfully, we have listening to some news coming from Israel of a certain type of violence that is going around Israel, and God forbid, as the great Rabbi said in an earlier class today, that this is not the way of Yehudim. This is not the way of Yehudim. Right? The concept of Hakol Kol Yaakov Yadayim Yedei Esav. The sound of the Torah is the sound of Yaakov. Violence is a student of Esav. Chas v'Shalom. So we hope and pray that everybody up there or in Eretz Israel will come down and have respect to human life, to property, to government, and whatever pathway it's required, as the Pasuk writes in the Pasuk that we actually quoted yesterday, Deracheha darche noam bechol netivoteha shalom. The ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness. There is no room for violence in the aspect of Torah. Perhaps they have to come to the iTorah.com and listen to a few Torah classes in order to enhance and improve their behavior. And therefore the Zohar Kadosh continues and it says that every day in the morning and in the evening, a person must devote a few minutes of Torah learning. The ladies can also be a partner in this mission, and this is by encouraging the husbands to go and to learn Torah. I know that for some today may be a bit challenging, but thank God with technology, you have beautiful platforms like iTorah.com and many others that a person can log in and sometimes watch live or sometimes listen to a Torah class. But it's essential that no day of our life goes without the ingredient of Torah. The Zohar adds also the benefits of learning Torah past midnight that some pious people do all over the world in order to bring the godliness of the Torah through the night and also throughout the day. The Zohar Kadosh, this was in a summary what yesterday the Zohar concluded, and the Zohar says a very beautiful pasuk, and then we go to today's portion. and it says, Yomam yetzaveh Hashem hasdo ubalayla shiro immi. This is from chapter 42 of the book of Tehillim that says, Yomam, during the daytime, yetzaveh Hashem hasdo. God will command His kindness to come. Ubalayla shiro immi. When you're gonna sing to me at night. What does this pasuk means? Why God needs to order the kindness to pay a visit to the person? Shouldn't be automatically that a person learn Torah, automatically the bonus or the dividends should be whatever benefit it is. It seems from this particular way that the Zohar explains is that God says to kindness, even though kindness may come to God and said, hold on, God, allow me to check the credit score of this person. Maybe the person is not deserving. God says, do me a favor, don't run his credit. I'm telling you, go and pay him a visit. What activated this sudden generosity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to tell kindness, go and pay a visit to the person? Short answer, Ubalayla Shiro Aimi, because the night before, this fellow learned Torah. And God says, he devoted time at night to learn Torah. I'm going to reciprocate by blessing him. What a beautiful, beautiful explanation of the Zohar HaKadosh. Let me take a quick look at the Zohar of today, a minute. Okay, the Zohar of today discusses a separate topic. So I'd like to maybe review some of the Musar messages of yesterday, and time allowing, I may continue with today. Another concept, the halakha of today, talks about personal holiness, not only for the men department, but for the ladies department as well. So the Gemara writes that there is a Torah prohibition of a man to be secluded with a married woman. And the pasuk in Sefer Devarim, this is quoted in Gemara Abodah Zara. And therefore it says the whole idea of the prohibition of ihud is to prevent crossing lines of immorality, of inappropriateness. And therefore we have, for example, something called, which is halachically required, it's not optional, it's called shomer negi'ah. Shomer negi'ah is a term that is utilized in the world of shidduchim when a single man and a single woman dating, trying to see if they're a suitable match to build a beautiful home together, they keep themselves a certain physical distance. Not a certain, a complete. I apologize for that. So it's the difference between certain. Actually, a complete separate distance. They don't touch each other, they don't hug each other, they don't kiss each other, they don't hold hands. May be challenging for many of us, but this is the idea of shomer negiah. And the reasons are many. First of all, a young lady, when she's dating someone, she is in the state of nida. She's impure. She gets the monthly cycle by the time she's dating. That's the way the human body works, even from younger years. So therefore, and number one, number two, a lady, until she gets married, she does not go to the mikveh. And therefore, the single girl is in a state of physical impurity until she decides to get married. She will take kala classes, he will take hatan classes, and now she's going to go to the mikveh, and whatever happens the first night of the wedding, etc. So that's the concept of shomer negiah. So that's reason number one. Reason number two, the moment that the boundaries of physical contact are removed, we do not know where that will end up. We don't have a catalog of hormones, of reactions, of emotions, of stress level, of desire, etc. And that can lead to a certain type of behavior which could be detrimental and could be regretful, especially when there is no guarantee that this young man and this young lady will ever marry. maybe they're just dating, they like each other physically and attraction, but regretfully they are not a proper combination between them, and that can lead or will lead to disastrous situations later. And that's why there is a takana of Ihud Penuya already from the time of David HaMelech. Due to the unfortunate incident of Amnon and Tamar, they made an additional gezerah that not only it is forbidden for a man to be alone with a relative that is forbidden to him, or a lady that is married to someone else, for a single man to be together and even in the same room without any supervision or without the door being open or being in a public place, due to the concept of ihud. And that's something that the halakha discusses very well. Now, the Musar of today or yesterday discusses a very deep spiritual concept. I'm not even sure how to explain this, but basically it means that part of galut, part of exile, it's part of the tikkun that the Jewish people need to do to purify or to atone for sins of the past. I'm not sure if it's clear, but any place where a Yehudi goes and comes will leave a mark. Sometimes this mark is a mark of holiness, but sometimes could be a mark of unholiness and at different levels of behavior. So what happened now with that? So according to the Musar of today, that comes from different sources, they say that when Yehudim come to a certain place, they build synagogues, they build Talmudei Torah, schools, kolelim, yeshivot, etc., community, they elevate, they purify, put it simpler English, they purify the aura of the area of the sins or transgressions committed by others maybe a long time ago. That's part of the Musar that started yesterday. And it says that one of the merits that Bnei Israel had to qualify to be considered a free nation coming out of Egypt, it says, Shehayu gedurim milahato ve'irva. The level of morality in the Jewish people was very high. What does that mean? That even though, and this was a zechut, a merit for the well-being of Am Israel, that even though that they were surrounded by immorality, the way we learned in the past, how Egypt was in such a dark spot in this particular level, but yet they kept their foundation strong and holy, and they avoided interacting with Gentiles in the concept of immorality, or if it means marriage, the way we discussed in the past with Gentiles of Egypt, or abortion, the way the Zohar mentioned in the beginning of Sefer Shemot. And the Zohar Kadosh and the Musar of today writes, and it says that one of the areas in life that a person can help expedite this exile, besides the topic of personal holiness and family purity that we have been discussing for a while, is actually the concept of Torah learning and reinforcing these particular areas of the personal life of the person, and definitely is out of the gift of Teshuvah that Borei Olam gives each and every one of us. And that's why the continuation of the Musar says these are the weeks that we take advantage of the gift of Teshuvah that the Almighty gives us to purify our own actions. Are we saints? Are we holy? Can we say that we never had a slip up, or we never, and that we always fulfill family purity and personal holiness to the ideal way? I hope that some can say yes. But unfortunately, many of us can say, Et hata'ai ani maskir hayom. I remember my youthful years in which perhaps certain things were not observed in the proper way. But the Musar of today says, take advantage of these days, because the zechut of these weeks of the Shovavim, the way we call them, have so much kedusha and so much power that they are able to reverse the mistakes and sins committed in the past. And whatever was done, God takes care of it, and in a more spiritual and a beautiful way. And therefore it says, Ha'ikar, one of the main pathways of Teshuvah, La'asod gedarim usdiagim. A person should build themselves fences. Why do you think that there are so many halachot against mixed dancing or mixed weddings, etc.? Why? Short answer, to avoid many of the scenarios that we discuss now. Touching nida, and one thing leads to the other, and usually, regretfully, sometimes people come to weddings dressed in a way which is not really conducive to the holiness of the wedding, maybe more conducive for a nightclub, etc. At Haz v'Shalom, who's going to step into a nightclub? God forbid. Okay, but definitely I think that this is part of the hidden message of the Musar of today, that a person, men and women, build fences of modesty, of holiness, of humility, of godliness. And it says this not only prevents the person of sinning, but also helps the person to do teshuvah. And this is something that is never too late. That's why in Hebrew, beged means a garment. Boged means to rebel against. So through the garments that a person wears can show I'm on God's side, or God forbid, I'm on the other side. I hope and pray that we are all on God's sides. And therefore it says, besides making your effort, talk to Hashem with an open heart. It says, Hashlech al Hashem Yehovcha. Cast upon God your burden. Although this pasuk many times it has been used for the topic of parnasa, livelihood, in this case, says the Musar of today, send the message to God. God, I need help in this area. God, help me to be more careful. God, help me to dress more proper. God, help me to dress less appropriate. In other words, help me not to, Haz v'Shalom, not to dress inappropriately. That's what I meant to say. Maybe it didn't come out good, so I apologize for that. That's basically what the Musar of today says. Or a man who looks around all over, who is not careful with what they look at. Doesn't matter, Jew, Gentile, married, single, it's moving, he looks. Haz v'Shalom. It's a Yetzer Hara. We're not holy, especially in some of our areas that is not too cold, and people tend to dress in certain ways which are halachically problematic for us. So we need to muster up the strength. And sometimes, I'll tell you, as a rabbi and as a person, I turn to Hashem, even when I'm driving, I said, dear God, what do you want from us? We just left the synagogue, giving a shiur, talking to people, doing mitzvot, and suddenly you drive 2 blocks, the Yetzer Hara is waiting for us. And you know what I mean. And doesn't have to be promiscuity. Could be somebody just walking around the circle, just for the record. But it says, nevertheless, that the Almighty will answer that call for spiritual assistance to be able to preserve the holiness and the sanctity of our life. At this moment today, I will finish the class at this moment, and I have to attend downstairs to a matter. But Be'ezat Hashem, we'll be back at 11 o'clock today to continue the weekly lesson of the Pirkei Avot. So we say to everybody, thank you, have a beautiful day, and the zechut of today's learning brings a refuah shelema to Yosef Ben Sophia among all of the Holim of Am Israel, and we'll be back in an hour, Be'ezat Hashem. Have a great day, everybody. Shabbat Tov u'Mevorach.